super Sunday morning service. Oh, it got nice and quiet in here. Well, welcome everybody. My name's Todd Masnicki, your presider this morning. And on behalf of Center for Spiritual Living Fort Lauderdale, I want to welcome all of you here, whether you're joining us in person or live streaming on Facebook Live, YouTube, or our website, cslftl.org. Thank you for starting your Sunday morning with us, and know that it is going to serve your best and highest good by being present here right now. I have some brief announcements. Happy to say that we're going to have a TPL, the Prosperous Life Banquet, on Friday, October 25th from 6:30 to 9 here at the center. And Dr. John's going to say a few words about that with you.
Yeah, might as well come up. I don't need that. I think I'm wired. Hi, everybody. Good to see you all this morning. So, yes, members of the Prosperous Life Program, TPL, we're hosting a banquet celebration on October 25th. Every member of TPL is welcome. And everyone that's in TPL should be getting an invitation in the mail either yesterday or tomorrow. And it was pointed out to me right away this morning that there's a typo. So what's the website address for Center for Spiritual Living Fort Lauderdale? CSLFTL, right? So disregard the CLSFTL on this sheet, okay? And do your registration on the website. You know where it is. So is there anybody in the room that is not a member of TPL that would like to be and like to come to our banquet? If so, just raise your hand. We got one right here and here and here. It's time. Let's do this. There we go. All we're doing is handing you this invitation, and all you have to do now is register according to the instructions on here, with that one caveat about being part of our or about where the website is. Other than that, we're set. And thank you very much, Reverend Tina, for handing these out. Just understand that doing this is being a member of this group. So and this is the core group of people that support the financial well-being of our center. So thank you so much for your interest in this, and we're going to have a great banquet. All right.
Yes, we are. And if you have any questions about TPL, please go to guest services after the service, or see me after the service. I'll be here, and I'm happy to talk to you about that wonderful program that we have here. Also, Reverend Tina is going to come out to talk about ecstatic dance. She has an ecstatic dance announcement.
Hello, hello. So the first Sunday of every month, we are doing ecstatic dance here at the Center for Spiritual Living. This will be our third installment. Myself and Juan Carlos. Juan Carlos will be DJing. I will be helping facilitate the event. What is ecstatic dance, you might ask? It's a moving meditation to music, and the importance of moving our body. I don't know about you, but right now in the times that we're experiencing, the hardship that everyone's feeling from the hurricane, sometimes I feel paralyzed as what to do. And I know that as I move my body, I become present to this moment. The inspiration, the freedom, the peace moves through me, and then I'm moved to action, what I can do. Instead of feeling helpless, I'm hopeful, and I have a direction of where to go. So this is a safe environment to come to. We will start with meditation. We move into a 45-minute ecstatic dance movement, and we end with a sound bath. So we would love to see you all here tonight. It starts from 7 to 9. Doors open at 6:30, and it's $20. And it's something that we are doing as well as an offering to also bring more people, diverse people who maybe don't normally come to the community. Last month we had 10 new people who had never been to CSL before who came in for ecstatic dance. So it's super exciting, and we would love to see you there.
Thank you, Reverend Tina. And our last announcement, in collaboration with one of our newest community partners that you all selected over
No.
the last several weeks, the Pantry of Broward, we are taking collections for a Thanksgiving food drive. The deadline for accepting all goods is November 15th. And on November 3rd and November 10th, there'll be boxes that will be at the CSL door, but we'll take donations at any time. And this is a Thanksgiving drive. So there's a sheet up at guest services. We're also going to have it posted on the website and on the app of the foods they specifically need for Thanksgiving. So we ask that you just check that out and bring those needs for us. And thank you in advance for your kindness for those who otherwise wouldn't be able to have a Thanksgiving dinner. So for more details about this and everything going on at CSL, please go to guest services in the lobby or to our app or cslftl.org. So in closing, here at CSL, we have an intention statement that says who we are and how we want to be present in the world. So I ask you to all please join me in standing, and we will say it together. Afterwards, please greet your neighbor or your friend with a hello, a handshake, or a namaste. So CSL Fort Lauderdale family, who are we? We are a loving and diverse spiritual community dedicated to personal growth, healing, and service.
is. Okay. I have to turn myself on and off now. That's the way our system is working. If I don't, you're going to hear me say things you shouldn't hear. So I'm going to learn to turn myself on and off. So let's do a treatment. Let's open this in prayer. And knowing that this is the perfection of life right here and right now, Spirit is in this place, in each one of us, at the center of our very being, and we at the center of all that is. And knowing this is so, we bring our best this day. We shine brightly for all to see. We enter into this knowing of life to a deeper understanding, a deeper relevance to who we are on planet Earth and what is ours to do and be. And all is good. All is good because we keep waking up. We keep learning more. We keep expanding our understanding of life, and life keeps getting better and better. And knowing this is so, I celebrate it. I know it's so. I let it be in the allness of Spirit. And together we say, and so it is. All right.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue, and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, and the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, and I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, wonderful world.
We thought we'd give the light center stage today. Center for Spiritual Living Fort Lauderdale is a member community of Centers for Spiritual Living, a global organization with member communities across North and South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, and Australia. We are a spiritual community that respects and honors all faiths that seek to create a better world. We know there is no wrong way to acknowledge divine spirit, whether by lighting a candle, chanting a mantra, or offering prayer. We respect and honor all paths that call us to a greater awareness of spirit. This morning we celebrate the diversity in religious practices with our ceremony known as Flames of Faith. The first candle is lit for the Tao, to honor the disciplined path of heavenly order, the natural way. The candle is lit for the shamanic traditions, honoring the beliefs and spiritual practices of all indigenous people. The candle is lit for Hinduism, to honor the spiritual path of divine self-awareness, balance, and harmony. The candle is lit for Judaism, to honor the path of devotion to one God. The candle is lit for Buddhism, to honor the Four Noble Truths and the way of compassion. The candle is lit for Christianity, to honor the Christ consciousness alive within us all. The candle is lit for Islam, to honor the path of peaceful submission to the will of God. The candle is lit for the Baha'i faith, to honor the spiritual unity of all mankind, humankind. Let's do that right. The candle is lit for our own faith, New Thought, Ageless Wisdom, to honor the metaphysical path and the practice of universal spiritual principles. And the final candle is lit for peace and for our sacred appreciation of all faiths and all principled spiritual practices throughout the world. And so it is. I think it's still me. Good morning again. You'll recall the last 2 Sundays we distributed ballots with 5 candidates for community partners and a line at the bottom for suggestions. Let me tell you the results. We select each year 3 community partners. These are our partners for 2025. Kids in Distress, which merged with Covenant House. Those of you that voted for Kids in Distress and put at the bottom that we should include Covenant House. Pantry of Broward and SunServe. And what I learned from the suggestions at the bottom is that next year we'll include something that has to do with the care of animals. Okay? So as is our tradition, we're going to introduce you to these 3 community partners. And our first one we'll hear from Mr. Warren Lubeau, Director of Operations for the Pantry of Broward. And he's going to tell us about his organization. Welcome, Mr. Lubeau.
Thank you, Dr. John. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for selecting the Pantry of Broward. Just if I can, by a show of hands, how many people actually know or have heard of the Pantry of Broward? Oh, wow. That's about 70% of the room. Fantastic. So I'd just like to share with you a few minutes all the good work we're doing at the pantry. But before I get started, I was quite surprised last week to get the call from Dr. John, and we were just chatting back and forth, and we learned that we actually grew up about 5 minutes from each other in Miami. So the circle of life is true. Here we are 100 years later, you know,
Speak for
working
yourself.
together. So the interesting thing about the Pantry of Broward is we're a client-based pantry. So you have to qualify in order to be a client at the pantry. And the founder, B.J. Buntrock, who started the Pantry of Broward back in 2008, had two essential missions that she wanted to serve. One was low-income seniors, and the other was grandparents raising their grandchildren in Broward County. She started with one client, and today we're serving over 600 clients a month. So what does that mean? We provide our clients with a monthly food supplement. So about half of them come in and pick up at the Pantry of Broward, and the other half we deliver to where they live in either in their own individual homes or in low-income housings. So in order to build 600 boxes a month, we can't do it with our 6 full-time people and 2 part-time people, so we rely heavily on volunteers in the community. So I would say to you, there's 3 ways people could help in our community. One is, if you're interested in volunteering, we're actually not far from here. We're right just south of Sunrise Boulevard off of Andrews. If you know where the big, colorful Fort Lauderdale water tower is, that's in our backyard. So that's one way you can help out. The other way is doing a food drive. And thanks to Dr. John and your organization, I see you guys will be participating in our Thanksgiving food drive. With our monthly food supplements that we provide, every client gets a box each month, and then in Thanksgiving, they get a 13th box, an extra box, so that they can have their own Thanksgiving dinner. Everything is provided for them, including turkeys. So the Friday before Thanksgiving, we have a drive-through. They just go by, and we have volunteers all helping to load their cars, so they're able to appreciate Thanksgiving as well. The other way you can donate, again, is the food drive for Thanksgiving or even throughout the year. You know, just either in your organizations or your families or your works, we can provide you with boxes, and you do a simple food drive. And then the third way, of course, is financial. And we're just honored to be recognized by you all as one of your nonprofits for 2025. With that being said, we've got quite an exciting news that's about to be announced for the Pantry of Broward. As I said, we've been there since 2008. The average lifespan of a food pantry is like an NFL career, about 3 to 5 years. So to be in business for 16 years really says a lot. And we have, thank you. We have tremendous support from our partners in the community. And for the last 3 years, we've been submitting applications to the state of Florida to, we own the land where we're at, to tear down our building and build a affordable senior housing complex on our property. It's, well, you know what they say, be careful what you ask for. Because after 3 years, we finally did win the state award. And in January, we will be tearing down our building. We'll be relocating over to the Marina Mile Office Park on State Road 84 for about 18 months to 2 years. And then in hopefully summer of 2026, we'll have roughly a 100-unit complex for low-income seniors. And then all of the pantry operations will be on the first floor. The good news about that is the grant from the state will cover the building, but we've got to raise our own money for our operations. So you'll be hearing about that. And we've been in business 16 years, and we've never asked for money. We've just always been appreciative for whatever has come to us. But I have a few minutes here. I just wanted to say sincerely, thank you all for recognizing the Pantry of Broward. I always say we have 600 clients right now. We could double that in tomorrow because the demand is out there. You know, people, BJ coined the phrase the silver tsunami, which is the end of the baby boomer populations all turning 60 and 65 now, and many of them not prepared for, I won't call it retirement, but for their non-working life. And you cannot live in South Florida on a $1,200 Social Security check. So it's community like you all that help us do what we do, and we couldn't do it without you. So Dr. John, thank you so much, and thank you all. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Almost see
That was one of Dr. Barbara's favorite songs. Those of you, the three of you in the room that don't know, my wife passed last year, and I'm learning how to live without that. You might notice I'm wearing pearls today. They're her pearls. Today is our 35th wedding anniversary. So don't feel sorry for me. I'm very happy that I had all those years with her. I'm very happy. So enough said about that. I am delighted to be here. As you know, I've been, well, let me say it this way. The Science of Mind, the work of Ernest Holmes, was really about the enlightenment of the individual, how a person could move through life successfully and have a different understanding of the makeup of the universe and how we as individuals fit into it. He was not particularly into societal things. He wrote some beautiful prayers when the world was at war and this country was suffering, but that wasn't the impetus of his teaching. I, however, really like this sociology stuff, looking at history and such. So I'm on a rant right now that started with my reading a book, which I started sharing from last week, called The Fourth Turning. And to make matters worse, one of the authors of The Fourth Turning, the surviving one, wrote another book. The Fourth Turning is here. So I'm working on this one now. And I'm bringing you the essence of this. And if you want to get either of these books, I encourage it because I think it's quite enlightening. But it's not so much about us as individuals, but us as a collective and how we deal with that. Now, before I go into this, a lovely woman came up to me, first time last week, she had been here, came up to me and said, okay, I heard what you said. What about free will? And my answer to her was that I'm not in any way denying that we are a free will. We are completely free to choose and do whatever we want to do. The thing is that we are influenced by our culture. We are influenced when we're young by people older than us. And as we grow and move through our lives, we become influential to people that are younger than us. And it's not just about age. We can influence one another. Being the same age, we can influence people older than us. But influencing things are happening all the time. And when the entire population of the planet decides that something is so, generally everybody goes with it. I know that there's this thing called the Flat Earth Society. Seems most peculiar to me that people want to hold on to that idea. But once they figured out that you could travel all the way around the world, everybody got it. Everybody got it. It's the planet is round, and it's floating in space. We figured that much out, and we figured out a lot of things along the way. But there's other things that we hold that maybe aren't all that accurate, or ideas that keep us from going deep into understanding what's happening. So this whole thing about this idea of what's called the Fourth Turning is a look at history in a way that could help us anticipate what's happening in the future. Thus, the name of my talk, Anticipation is Power. So I want to share from this book, these two books actually, some clever ideas that will help us anticipate where we are going as a society, as a country, and as a species. So follow me as we move along on this. Just a question to start with. Wouldn't you like to know what's going to happen in your life next? Wouldn't that be nice to know? Some people don't want to know. I get that, especially if it's about when we're going to die. But I find that having information is helpful for me to make my plans. And even if it's not exactly accurate, just not to be totally startled and overwhelmed when something happens. How many of you remember when you heard about COVID? When there was an announcement on the news that said, the Chinese government has identified a virus that seems to be spreading through Asia. How many of you actually knew what that meant and what that was going to do? And how many lives would be affected? And how many organizations, such as this one, would be impacted? We lost 25% of our communities during COVID. And not just in our teaching, but in all churches of all forms were dwindled by about 25% because we didn't know it was coming and we didn't know how to deal with it. Even though 100 years earlier, the same thing happened. Interesting. So, that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm bringing this to you. If it bores you, I ask you to forgive me. But it excites me to be able to know these things. So, again, that question about knowing, people spend a lot of money to have somebody tell them what's going to happen in their lives. They go to psychics and readers of tarot cards and tea leaves and palms and God knows what else they read. Because people want to know. They want to know if they should get in that certain relationship, if they should invest in that certain investment, or they should change a career to move to a different kind of work, or they should buy an electric vehicle, or how artificial intelligence is going to change their world. People want to know these things. Well, most of that you can't know until it happens. But there is this thing called futuring, where people have studied what's happened in the past and have begun to predict what's happening in the future. It's been going on for a while. I read a book by a futurist not too long ago, a few years ago, called The Rational Optimist, where he found people that were doing things on the planet that would make a radical difference, and how what they were doing would change the world. And I found that a very fascinating book and enjoyed reading it and learning, and most of what he predicted did actually happen. And the conventional wisdom of our culture would tell you that the future is a mystery and no one knows. And to some degree that's true, but not completely. And the issue that's around that really is about who we are as a society and what we can, as a collective, anticipate based on what's happened in the past. So the thing that I want to say as we begin that look really has to do with time, because people perceive time in three different ways. Some people perceive time chaotically, meaning that one random act happens, then another random act happens, and then another and another and another. None of it can be predicted or planned on, and we just have to deal with it. Other people believe that life is linear, that time is linear, and that we move from one event to the next, and that they're actually connected, that all of these things that happen in the world are connected, but they happen in a straight line and move from present to future or past to future in a very direct line. And third, people believe that time is cyclical. And I think they're onto something. That's actually the way the ancients looked at it. Imagine, if you would, a drawing of a tornado that starts with a small circle at the bottom but comes up with a slightly larger spiral, and it continues and it continues and it continues and it continues. I think time and life is like that. And I think at each point in that circle, as it spirals up, goes through a similar season or a similar aspect or era, and that it repeats. With each cycle, it starts again and again and again. And with that image of the tornado, obviously the cycle or the spiral gets larger as it goes up, and I think that's what's happening, because we have things that change, that impact us. We have technology, we have science, we have all kinds of things that create a different understanding of our world. So we're evolving as we do it, but we're still going through the same cycles. And that's the premise behind this book, The Fourth Turning. And that's the essence of what I want to share with you. So to catch up anybody that wasn't here last week, I'm very quickly going to go through some ideas that I shared last week. So bring up that next slide, that one right there. This is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about spring. Now, we're not talking about the spring of seasons on the planet. We're talking about the spring of someone's life. That's our childhood. That's from birth to 20 years old. And the current group that's in a generation of that, in their spring, is called the Generation Alpha. We don't know much about them because they're little. The oldest alpha generation member is 16 right now. And probably it'll go for another 4 to 6 years. And we'll call that a generation. And then they give it a name up front, but as it develops and starts having its experience on the planet as these seasons move, they get a different name sometimes. And I'll talk about that later. So in the summer, which is young adulthood, those are ages 21 to 41, is right now Generation Z. That's people born from 1999 to 2012. The next one is the fall, which is midlife. That's people who are between 42 and 62 years old, and those are our millennials. And then we have our winter, which is our elderhood, which has our Generation X, 1961 through 1981, and baby boomers, 1940 through 1960. I think I've covered everybody in the room because those are people that are alive today. So I wanted you to know about how that fits in, but that's just the beginning of the story. So this week's look is looking at what we call a seculum. A seculum is a period of about an average human lifetime, between 80 and 100 years. It's a full cycle of seasons. And the seasons in this model that I'm talking about are called turnings. That's why it's called the fourth turning. So we're going to explain how those things work. Let me tell you what these turnings are first. The first one is called a high. Simply called a high. Why? Because it's good times. We've just gone through some kind of a terrible circumstance, and things are better. And I'm going to give you some examples of that in just a minute. The next turning is called the awakening. And that's where we take that good times feeling and put it to work and start reforming our society with new ideas and new technologies and new understandings. It's still a good time. The third turning is called unraveling. That's where things start to look like they're not working so good. Like maybe this isn't the answer. Like maybe we need to take another look and rethink this thing. And then the final is called the crisis. Oh goodness, the crisis. What does that mean? That means that we as human beings have been really, really good at staying in this rotation of seasons to where things collapse and fall apart. Now that sounds terrible, but the truth is that the crisis actually allows something new to come forward. For example, forest fires. We think they're terrible. We see all of the waste of all the trees and the plants and the animals that die in a forest fire. But what happens afterwards? New life springs forth. There are actually plants on the planet that send their seeds out, and the seeds hit the ground, often get buried over time, but they won't germinate until there's a forest fire, until that heat, that intense heat, actually breaks the outside of the seed and allows it to come forward. Amazing how nature works, but the human experience works much the same way. And that's what I want to share with you today. So we're going to go through the 4 turnings that we're currently in, and I'm going to, as I do each one, I'm going to reference the turning that came before that, so that you get a sense of how they're similar. Okay? That's what we're going to work on. So we're starting, of course, with the first turning. It's called the high. Our most recent first turning was from 1946 to 1964. Not everybody in here was alive at that time, but I certainly was. That was the time of the baby boomers. And the archetype of that time is called the prophet. So all of us that were born between 46 and 64 are prophets. Doesn't that sound lovely? It doesn't quite mean that. But it's good for our ego. So the first turning that most recently happened began with the end of World War II, when the Allies had victory over the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. Very difficult time in the world, actually, but we came out of it strong as a nation. It was a time of great conformity, and the reason for that was that virtually every young man who was born in the GI generation before the boomers, the parents of the boomers, the GIs went to war. And they learned how to be disciplined. They saw people die. And they learned how to do what needed to be done to get life to work. And many of their spouses and other people, women, stayed in this country and worked in factories to build up the war machine so that we could send that in two different directions. Any student of war will tell you never have two fronts, but we did. We had the Pacific theater and we had the European theater, and we sent men to both of them, and we sent supplies to both of them, and all of that incredible energy during that time created a generation of people that were highly disciplined, that were willing to work and do what it would take to make their lives work, and they did. And they lived in good times in that high. The most middle-class men who served in World War II were taught to follow orders, and they did. It was a time when the distribution of wealth in America was almost even for most people. Yes, there were rich people, but most people were at least able to buy a home. Even if they worked in a grocery store or a gas station, they could afford a home. That isn't the case today. Most people experienced equity in their lives. Now, not all, and we're going to get to that in a minute, but it seemed that way for a lot of us. The big things that were going on in this era that defined it were things like rock and roll. People like Elvis Presley and Little Richard, Chuck Berry, and Jerry Lee Lewis. Television was created in that era. The space program was founded. Jet airplanes became commercial airplanes. The Corvette was created. Mustangs were created. So were bikinis and miniskirts. It was a good time. By today's standards, it wasn't ideal, though, because segregation was still common in the South. Prejudice was rampant. I remember drinking fountains for whites and non-whites, is what it said. Homosexuality was still illegal and considered a mental disorder. So we didn't have it all figured out. There was much more to do. But you know what? There's always more to do. We're finding our way. This high turning ended with the assassination of President Kennedy. Now before that, many years before that, all the way back to 1865 through 1886 was a first turning. The generation was called the missionary generation. They were prophets, just like my generation, but they lived way before that. The Civil War was the thing that ended the last crisis and brought about the high. What happened during that time, of course, was that President Lincoln was assassinated and the Civil War was over. Reconstruction began, and the 13th and 14th Amendments to our Constitution were established, abolishing slavery and establishing civil rights for former slaves. It was an important time in the history of our country. It was the rise of industrialization in America, the Gilded Age, and the growing political power of guess who? The Republican Party, which was the liberal party at the time. Amazing how things changed. It was a time when Edison introduced electricity as a utility. So we got a lot done way back then. So coming back into our current cycle, our current seculum, the second turning, the second phase of this, known as the Awakening, happened between 1965 and 1984. Think about where you were in those years. It was the years when Generation X was born, and they're called the nomad archetype. Nomad? Wonder what that means. It was a period of nonconformity, focusing on social injustice and increasing individualism. That's what influenced Generation X in their youth. Although the GI and the silent generations who had come before the boomers were in charge, the boomers were having something to say when they protested the Vietnam War and when they went to Woodstock. Other things that defined this awakening era were in our music. It was the music of the Beatles, of Bob Dylan, James Brown, the Beach Boys, the Supremes, and the Rolling Stones. Some of those people are still around, but they're really old. There was quite a run on non-pharmaceuticals at the time. Everything from marijuana to psychedelics. became very popular, especially with that younger generation. Stanley Kubrick, remember him? He made movies back then that really changed the focus of what we did with our movies in this country. His movies included Dr. Strangelove, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Clockwork Orange, remember that one? Ooh. Full Metal Jacket, most powerful metal or war movie I ever saw, and The Shining. Then there was Star Wars, which celebrated the underdog winning and captivated our culture. Women's rights, gay rights were established, and we began to see a change in how the culture viewed people that were women and gays. U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War, I already talked about the protest. It was a major impact on that second turning. And the last one is computers. Oh my God, computers. Most of you are not old enough to remember, but I worked for a company in Houston, Texas, where their computer was on the 8th floor, and it was the only thing on the 8th floor. And it was a pretty big building. And when you got off there, you were immediately freezing for how cold they got it. And the walls were covered with these machines that had these spinning things. They would spin and stop and spin and stop and spin and stop. And we had to take our punch cards up there to have them put into the computer. That's how it started. And then some geniuses came up with the idea of personal computers, and that changed everything. All of that happened in our second turning, the current seculum of moving through life. Now, the second turning that happened, well, let me first say that second turning ended with the second term election of Ronald Reagan. Now, before that, the previous second turning was from 1886 to 1908. You'll notice that these numbers don't line up because this is not math, it's history. The lost generation was born during that. They weren't called the lost generation because we couldn't find them. They were called the lost generation because so many men had died in World War I from that generation. So that's where they got that name. And they were also the nomads. Their defining events in their lifetime was the dedication of the Statue of Liberty, the Chicago labor riots, the invention of Coca-Cola, the Spanish-American War, the rise of industrial giants and commercial giants like Carnegie and Rockefeller, Vanderbilt and Morgan. You probably don't remember those names, but they were the titans of their time. The Wright brothers took their first flight at Kitty Hawk. Henry Ford introduced the Model T. It was a good time. It was a strong time in our country. And then we moved to the third turning. That's called the unraveling. The unraveling right now, currently, was the time when millennials were growing up. Were born between 1984 and 2008. They're still growing up. They were the hero archetype. Why the hero archetype? Because basically this is the generation that fixes everything that's breaking at the time that we get to our unraveling. And they seem to do it. Every cycle, they seem to do it. Here's the things I can tell you about the third turning that we've gone through. It was messy. President Reagan, standing at the wall in Berlin, said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." It wasn't long after that the wall came down, and so did the Soviet Union. But it was replaced by a gangster state. Now, you may argue on that, but I believe that Russia right now is a gangster state, and that's why it's such a problem in the world. There are other things that define this. Boomers finally had their chance to be in charge as young adults and midlifers, but without a lot of encouraging results, a little bit of encouraging results. Let's talk about music. Our music icons of the time were Michael Jackson, Aretha Franklin, Whitney Houston, Stevie Wonder, and Prince. Notice anything about those people? Yes. They're the ones that really created quality in our music during that time. There were the LA race riots that happened at that time. There was the OJ trial. Remember that? We may not remember where we lived at that time, but we remember the OJ trial. Quite a time. There was the bombing of Bosnia and the Columbine High School massacre that happened on the same day. And then there was September 11th, 2001. It changed this country forever and took us through 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Challenging times for America, challenging times for many people. Our unraveling ended with the financial crisis of 2008, the worst financial disaster since the Great Depression, and has since become known as the Great Recession. The previous third turning that happened years before was from 1908 to 1929. This was the period of time when the GI generation, or what became known as the Greatest Generation, began. That's when they were born. Let's see, they were the hero archetype, which is what we're talking about right now. And the events that defined their era were World War I, the 1918 influenza or pandemic, which killed somewhere around 100 million people worldwide. 100 million people. The passage of the women's suffrage movement was at that time. The Roaring 20s, when this country had amazing and significant economic growth. But it all ended with the third turning when the stock market crashed in 1929. Similarities between these 2 eras, even though they were many, many years apart. And so we begin our fourth turning, the one that's really the most important to us right now. It's called the crisis. It started in 2008 with the financial problems of that time. We don't know when it's going to end. The generation right now is called Generation Z. They'll have a better name before long. They're called artists. That's their archetype. They're artists. That's what's important. That's what will be important to them, as it was to their predecessors. We hear a lot of politicians and pundits talk about the idea that we're getting close to a third world war. Nobody wants that. But if we're going to look at this, we have to look at the previous crisis turnings in this country. The one before now was the fourth turning was the end of World War II. The fourth turning before that contained the American Civil War. And the fourth turning before that was the Revolutionary War. Now, I will not stand here and tell you that we have to go through this kind of a major conflict again, a world war. I don't want us to do that at all. But it's a possibility. And what this tells us, and what we're going to do next week, is look deeply into fourth turnings and what's there and how we can extrapolate and look at where we're going. This turning that we're in right now could last another 8 or 9 years. And we don't know what's there. But what we want to do, and what I want you to have, is an understanding of this, so that as we move into it, you don't give up your power, that you don't think we have lost and that this is failing us. It's not failing us. All we need to know is where we're going, and use the principles we teach in Science of Mind, and we'll be fine. We'll get through this. And then something wonderful will happen. But we're going to have to go through this fire for that to happen. That's what's going to be important. So here's what's happened already in our fourth turning. The financial crisis of 2008 started it. 40 million Americans lost their jobs during that. There were 112 million people that were infected with COVID. 1,219,428 is the current count on COVID deaths in America. The American political divide has never been bigger than it is right now. And that election that's going to happen in 30 days is going to have a lot to say about how this turning ends. So be mindful as you vote, and please vote. So during the last high and awakening, politicians disagreed, but after they disagreed, they went to dinner. That doesn't happen right now. So we're learning. We're finding our way. It's tough. My teacher, when I was in Australia, still learning about this whole idea of a spiritual essence, said to me one day that something was going to happen in the beginning of the next millennium. He had a way about this. I don't know how he did it, but he said, and you need to get ready because people are going to rely on you. Well, it seems right now that the ones that are relying on me are you. So I bring this to you with a great sense of responsibility, that you're prepared, that you can anticipate. I'm not talking about being Chicken Little and the sky is falling, but understand that we have a lot of history to look at here that tells us things about where we're going. And I'm going to tell you everything I know about it for the next couple of weeks. Next week, my talk title is Back to the Future, which we will do. We'll go back to the future and see where we're going. I hope this was helpful. I didn't see a lot of yawns, but then again, the lights are pretty bright. So thank you for your kind attention through this. This is what I know today, and this concludes our lesson, and so it is. Thank you. So I believe it's time for us to reflect. So we're going to do that. I invite you to close your eyes. Just go inward. And we'll do our introduction.
God is all around me. God is all around me.
Yes. God is all around us. Spirit is at the center of our being. And as I've said many times, I'm not speaking of the center of our bodies. I'm speaking of the center of our essence, our spiritual essence. That's where we find the divine. Perfect, whole, complete in every way. And being these spiritual beings of love and light, we have a great capacity to be resilient. We have the ability to overcome the challenges of life, the conditions that face us, by knowing the truth of our divine nature and by standing strong and tall against whatever seems to be opposed. There is nothing greater than the human spirit, and that is who and what we are. Know with me that with Spirit at the center of our being, we are powerful and capable of doing whatever needs doing. Know with me that you and I are vibrantly healthy, wonderfully abundant, and always surrounded in love. And know with me that our lives are God's life right now. so it is.
Good morning again, CSM. We're still celebrating National Hispanic Heritage Month. So this week we chose Gloria Stefan. In March 1990, Stefan sustained a life-threatening injury where she was paralyzed, and she had a cervical fracture of her spine, and her tour bus was involved in a serious crash in Scranton, Pennsylvania. She underwent an emergency surgical stabilization of her cervical spine and post-surgical rehabilitation that lasted almost a year, and she made a full recovery. Later that year, in March, she launched her comeback album under the name of Into the Light. So this song is called Out of the Darkness de la Oscuridad. No hay que temer si sola no estoy. La vida nunca es fácil, sé a dónde voy. Siempre llena de preguntas, si es como soy. Cada momento buscando algo en que creer. Desde la oscuridad veo el sol de nuevo día naciendo en mí.
See the light, see the light, see the light. Desde la oscuridad,
El amor que me ha salvado lo recibo de ti. Vuelvo a empezar de nuevo otra vez. Tu mano en la mía, más fuerte estaré. Quizás mis pasos lentos, yo llegaré. Caminemos juntos, quiero compartir el milagro que me has dado.
desde la oscuridad.
Veo el sol de un nuevo día naciendo en mí.
See the light, see the light, see the light. Desde la oscuridad,
El amor que me ha salvado lo recibo de ti. Siempre
stand on the right.
desde donde tu amor.
Siempre,
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 siempre. No hay que ver que vaya por siempre.
stand on the
La luz de tu amor me salvará. Viendo de verdad.
See the light, see the light, see the light. Desde la oscuridad,
Veo el sol de un nuevo día, lo recibo de ti.
see the light, see the light, see the light. Desde la oscuridad,
Veo el sol de un nuevo día, naciendo en mí.
see the light, see the light, see the light. Desde la oscuridad,
Veo el sol que me ha sacado, lo recibo de ti.
see the light, see the light, see the light. Desde la oscuridad.
So I know that there are a number of people in the room for the first time That's wonderful. Many of you that are here for the first time are here because someone brought you. So the way I'd like it to work this morning when we greet you is to have the one who brought somebody introduce them to us. Can we do that? And if you came by yourself, then you get to introduce yourself. But I know that a number of people are here because they were invited, and that's what I'd like to do. So who's here for the first time? Great. And the beautiful lady next to you is the one that invited you. Would you introduce this beautiful being to us?
Yes, sure. My name's Annabella, and I've been coming to the community since 2003. I started the location.
Hold that up a little closer to your mouth so we can hear you.
Yeah, I don't like to
Yeah,
close,
it
but it's
helps though.
okay. Well, I brought my friend here of time, and she's a great person. She's a very interesting person, and also she's a writer. She writes books. You'll
Oh.
be introduced to her book, and her name is Dion Patterson.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dion. Welcome. We're so glad that you're with us today. We hope we get to see you again. Who else is here for the first time? Hand the mic over. Yes, there we go. Who's your guest?
Sabina. My friend is Bill. He's here from St. Augustine. He goes to CSL up there.
Now, let me, everybody understand, Sabina's here for the second week in the row. She's the one that asked me about free will, and apparently it worked because she brought a friend. Everybody paying attention? That's how we do it. That's how it works. Thank you so much for being here, Deb. Thank you. And who do we have over here?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Maya. I have my lovely friend here, Dax. And actually, this is technically his second time, but
That's
the
all
first
right. We'll
time
pretend
was
like it's his first.
the ceremony.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Zach?
So, Dax.
Spell it.
D-A-X.
D-A-F, DAF.
X.
X-D-A-X,
Dax.
Dax. I got it, finally.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
He'll get
Dax,
it. He'll
welcome.
get it.
Well, I butchered your name, but please don't take it personal. I'm delighted that you're here. So, yay. So what you're receiving from Reverend Tina is a little card to fill out, and if you would just give us your name and email address, we're not going to inundate you with stuff, but we'd like to let you know what's happening here that's wonderful. Who else do we have here for the first time?